All right, guys, that was pretty quick, actually. So I have cut this bearing. You can probably see that right there. Cut it with the Dremel. Then I took my chisel and put it right inside here, and I hit it twice before, and as you can see, the bearing literally just slides off after that. Yeah. So once you use the chisel to break the tension, it basically just the bearing will just slide right off, and you can see that it's not always going to break where you cut. It's going to break wherever the tension was on the material. But this one happened to crack, as you can see inside there. It cracked right down my cut, and then it went straight down at the bottom. So it actually cracked outside the cut at the bottom. And most of the time it does not crack. It won't crack all the way through where your cut was. But the important part is that you don't cut all the way through the bearing. If you do that, then you end up hitting the carrier. But if you cut 80 or 90% of the material and then just smack it, 2-3 times with a chisel, the bearing will crack and it will slide right off. Super easy. Way cheaper than buying a $300 clamshell puller that does not work. And then this is for all of the bearings where the clamshell won't work. This is a great way to remove bearings. You just got to be careful. That's all. There's a little bit more attention to detail with the Dremel and just being careful with sparks and the standard safety stuff. But yeah, that's all there is to it. And then when it comes time to pressing a new bearing on here, which we'll do obviously a little later, this old bearing is a really good tool to use to you basically just flip it around and may have this mounting face or this face of the race against the other race, and then you can press the new bearing on using the old bearing and it'll press right on upside down, no problem. And then you don't have to buy a bunch of hydraulic press special tools and pipes and things like that. You can use sockets and old bearing races to press bearings on. That's no problem at all. It'll work like a champ. All right, so now that that is off, we can set our tool aside, and then you just basically lift up on the locker assembly. Nice and easy. Make sure you lift up with even pressure and take the locker assembly off. So this, or not a locker assembly, but this is the solenoid assembly. Now if we roll this solenoid assembly over, see how nasty this plate is. However, you can see this plate right here is what you don't want to damage. You're going to see a recess in the plate right there next to the sensor. And that recess accepts this pin. So that pin has to be inside of there when you put this back together. And you have to make sure that this is all going together nice and smooth and easy. We're going to take this and we're going to clean it. We're going to clean it all, and then when you go to put this back together, all this plate has got to go back together in the same way it came off, in the same position it came off. So you're going to want to mark it with a Sharpie. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. So I'm going to pull the plate off of the solenoid assembly, which we'll clean here in a minute and make it look nice and shiny and new, and we'll inspect it. But this plate assembly, before we take the two pieces, we're just going to wipe it off a little bit here. Wipe off a couple spots where we can mark it, just in case it has to come apart or it comes apart. The way I do it is I use lines, almost like Roman numerals, but I just use lines. So you put one line here, put two lines here, and then you can go as far as even putting another two lines over here, or three lines if you really want to get fancy. And then that way there's no mistaking how this plate goes back together when you take it apart. Now these triangle pieces on the end, the tips of these will bend if you're not careful, and that's what you don't want to do, is bend those. You need this plate to be able to slide nice and easy inside of there and not have any of those pieces bent. If you bend any of those, then that's bad news. But then it just comes apart like that, slides apart. We'll clean it. When you go to clean it, if you're using any chemicals, just make sure you don't wipe your Sharpie off. You know, be cognizant of your telltales that you put on, whether it's, you know, Sharpie, paint pen, whatever you want to use. Just don't wipe it off by accident. So we can take that apart, and we'll set that aside as well. All right. Well, we'll keep going. I'm going to clean all this, and I'll be back in a few.